Let's talk about the music and Off the Menu. You have a composer that you hired?
Yeah, a gentleman by the name of Dave Holden was the composer of both my films, Girl on the Edge and this recent film, Off the Menu. And my experience in working with him and collaborating with him has been magnificent. One of the things you learn in independent filmmaking is after you're burned out making the movie, you get to an editing room and you start putting staples that are, or examples that are available to the editor to stick in for cutting purposes, but you could never afford to buy. And in this particular case, my first movie and this movie, Dave mandated, if I wanted to work with him, I had to use original musicians that essentially encompassed the entire score of the film. And I used to be a musician, and for me that was just too good to be true. But along with that comes, just a burden for the filmmaker and for the composer, because everybody wants magic. And all the other composers that we interviewed for the movie were all going to do it on a synthesizer, He goes, you won't even be able to tell the difference in the violins, You won't be able to tell the difference, with the scale of the orchestra. It'll just be totally believable. And that's true. But when you bring in live musicians, there's just something that happens, especially if they're scoring it to picture. And that's what we did. We were very lucky to bring in some of the best musicians in Los Angeles and then double them and make them look, a 16-piece orchestra sound like a 60-piece orchestra. It's an interesting question about the fundamentals of putting music in a movie, because movies require you to, you have a number of avenues. You could buy stock music, needle drop is what it's called, and usually very affordable. And you can pay extra to have it for life, and you know what your burden is. And since you're speaking to not just the director but the producer, I'm going to tell you that that is a huge surprise to a lot of filmmakers, because they get up in the morning and they go, I gotta have that track from the Rolling Stones because the movie's about this and they got a song about this. And that was part of my pitch when I told my investors. And then he goes about trying to get the song, and the song, he might get a great deal on the song. He might pay, I'm making this up right now, 50 grand for that song I'm talking about, because the filmmakers have a rapport with the manager of the band or what have you. The problem is those songs that they're buying all are licensed, which means come up a year, they got to divvy up funds. And I know a filmmaker that made that mistake and put in at least 6 songs in his movie that are already established songs, but his nut annually is about 175 grand. Whether the movie makes money or not, he's got to pay it. And one of the luxuries I had is the composer not only was passionate enough to want to be a part of this project, but he saw a life at the other end where he could resell the music and make it up there. And it's turned into a very profitable thing, actually more profitable for him than me, because he can license the music to anybody.
Sorry to play the devil's advocate here, but wouldn't the contract say that he was purchasing it for this amount in perpetuity, or wouldn't there be a time frame when he would need to renew or something?
Well, this producer and director, who shall remain nameless, doesn't really, he's not an attorney, and he is so elated to get the music. He probably, I can only speculate, just like me, I'm not reading the fine print. And the outcome of it is that he woke up in the morning just with a huge smack in the face of something that he never anticipated. And to me, like I mentioned earlier, with my last film, I was never expecting to get a bill from SAG. I thought I'd paid all the people, and the movie hadn't even made half its money back. Why am I getting billed for residuals? And ignorance. You can call me a total dope, but I never was educated on that component. So I had to pull that money, which was over 20 grand, out of my own pocket, because the funds just simply aren't there. And I learned a huge lesson. So now, to your point, I will put in my budget, a certain amount of money aside for that 12 months later moment where you got to go, hey, I got to pay everybody. Another example is just understanding what you can't do and what you can do. And this goes to music, this goes to SAG actors, and this goes to getting excited about doing a special screening and not knowing the rules. Because if you take in money, that takes you to a different level.
And forgive me for asking it in that way, but I wouldn't have known that either. I wouldn't know that you would need to renew, a licensing fee or something. You'd be on the hook for another year. And
well, with music, this is very interesting. Great question, because I believe, and I'm sure that what I'm suggesting happens all the time, is you sell your movie to, let's just say hypothetically, it's really well received at Sundance. You sell your movie to a big, 5-star distribution company, and they go and recut it and pull those expensive songs out because they want to make money. Or conversely, the filmmaker pulls them out, so his film becomes more sellable.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Good to know.
And I have a friend who actually, my first screenwriter, my first movie, he sold his movie at Sundance, and it was called Blue Valentine.
Oh.
And his name's
Joey
Curtis.
Oh, sorry.
A very nice guy. He co-wrote that movie, but in his case, his next film was everybody was looking forward to it because his name was equated with a movie that won at Sundance. And the outcome of it is the person that bought his next movie gave him an extra $500,000 to sweeten the pie, put in better music, better sound effects. So that also happens as well. That's a gold mine in that case.
Right. Oh, great to know. Yeah. Just all these little surprises that you wouldn't expect, and you don't want to get that email on Monday morning.
Yeah. I think the film business is a complicated business, and you read in the papers about bad blood between distributors and filmmakers on very, very successful movies. And you see that, I'm just making this up, that the guy who wrote a film that won four Oscars still hasn't made one royalty yet. But meanwhile, everybody else has got their hands out.
Yeah.
And it's creative financing and what have you, but that doesn't even affect me now because I'm not even involved in that. But it is something you got to educate yourself.
Well, I had one filmmaker say to me that they made sort of a $250,000 reel for themselves. That's what they considered it at the end of the day. And it became a calling card, and then it led to other things, but they were surprised too.
Well, I think we all make movies as filmmakers to help identify our next endeavor. And you project a positive review, you project a positive, in some cases, financial success. People are more attracted to you. That's why I found it interesting in an earlier part of this conversation where I said screenwriters write great pieces, but they insist on directing it themselves when, in my mind, if you're an unknown, you're more likely not going to see that as a positive conclusion because who would put their money into a director that's never made a movie before?